Relationships and seesaws, they are really pretty similar. Some are big and some are small. Some are safe and padded, while others are dangerous and tall. There's strong ones, and not so strong ones, and too many others to count. But no matter the shape or size, they share one thing the same. They have to have two to work. And depending on who is part of the two, they could go nowhere, or somewhere further than intended. Or maybe they're matched perfectly, but their rhythm is, let's just say, less than splendid. Regardless of the case, one thing's for sure. To do it alone isn't fun. It's downright impossible. So let's talk about how to do it better. Seesaw. How do you balance your relationships?
This month we have been talking about boundaries. And if you'll remember, at the beginning of the month, we said for solid relationships, there has to be this balance in our lives. And we said, you are worthy of boundaries. You are worthy of having boundaries in your relationships. And so often, we are told this message that we have to give and give and give and give and give and give and give in our relationships. But at its core, Jesus says, love others as you love yourself. And so for balance in relationships and for the healthiest relationships that we can have in this life, there needs to be this idea that there is some that we give, but there are also these firm boundaries that we set in place to protect ourselves and to allow healthy people into our lives and allow healthy relationships to come in. And so we focused that first week on simply this idea that you are worthy of boundaries. You are worthy to stand strong and stand up for yourself and set some boundaries in your relationships. And then last time we met, we talked about this idea of just how do you go about setting boundaries? How do you communicate that to people? And how do you recognize in yourself when a boundary has been crossed? And so I've got those messages up on Facebook and YouTube. I would love for you to check them out if you need a refresher or if you didn't get a chance to hear those. But tonight, we are going to focus on this idea that is one of the most difficult things about boundary setting, and that's this. What do you do? How do you handle it? How should we handle it when people push against your boundaries? How should we handle it when you say, hey, man, this makes me uncomfortable, and the person just doesn't even care, and they continue to push against that and do the things that make you uncomfortable? Every boundary that we set with another person, when we communicate, hey, this made me uncomfortable. Hey, I don't feel right when you do this. Hey, this made me fearful. And when we communicate those boundaries, there are always going to be two reactions. One of two reactions is going to happen. And this can fall, all of these reactions can look a little bit different, but there's going to be one of two reactions that's going to happen. One is the person is going to respect your boundaries. And when this happens, your relationships are strengthened. When you go to a friend and you say, hey, you may not know this, but when you made that joke, it really hurt me. And your friend would go, hey, man, I'm so sorry about that. I won't joke with you like that anymore. Boom, relationship stronger, boundary set, and person respected your boundary. They listened to you. And our relationships grow in that situation. And when we think about responding to how people react to our boundaries, that's an easy one to respond to. Our relationships just continue to grow. But then we get to the point where people ignore our boundary setting. We tell them, hey, this really made me uncomfortable. Hey, this really hurt me. And they completely ignore it and continue to push past the boundary. And this can look a whole lot of different ways. You can try to say something and the other person can get angry and start coming down on you because you set a boundary. That's a form of ignoring a boundary. It makes you begin to doubt why you set the boundary, or should you have set the boundary in the first place. The person could maybe not get angry, but maybe make fun of you. Maybe they start to really dog you because you are setting a boundary in place, and it makes you start to doubt whether you should set a boundary. Maybe the person isn't making fun of you, but they're just setting doubt in your mind, like, come on, that's really not a big deal. And they push against these boundaries. And all of these are forms of ignoring boundaries. And this communicates something to you. This communicates to you that the person that you are friends with, the person that you are setting boundaries with, the person that you have a relationship in your life with, cares more about what they want than how what they want makes you feel. When people ignore our boundaries, it communicates the person doesn't really care about us. They care more about what they want than how what they want affects us. And so how do we handle those situations? When I was in middle school, we did this thing after lunch where you could go to the gym and you could either do one of two things while you were waiting for everybody else to finish eating and start class. They either had a volleyball tournament set up or they had a three-point basketball tournament set up. And so the way you would do it is you would finish eating, you'd go, I would always eat really fast because I was always really excited to get to the gym and play either volleyball or basketball and just get some energy out and try to be champion of the lunch hour. And so I would eat really fast, and I would go and I would put my tray away, and I would go over to the gym, and the line started in rows. So like if you sat in the first row, your team was next in line, and then you would just move up a row. And so one day after lunch, I went over to the gym, and there were like 3 teams in front of me. So I sat like 4 rows up behind the team, and it was a volleyball tournament day. So I told my friends that were at lunch, I'm gonna go hop in line. You guys finish up and come meet me there. And so I went and I hopped in line, and I'm sitting there all by myself in this row, saving my spot for my team. It was like in 6th grade. This 8th grader comes up, and really tall kid, and I was really short. I know, shocker. When I was in 6th grade, I was even shorter than I am now, obviously, but short for a 6th grader, right? So I was a teeny tiny little guy. And so I'm sitting there in this row, and this kid comes up, big guy, and he sits right next to me, and he's like, hey, this is my spot. And I'm like, no, I'm playing, I'm here. And he's like, no, scoot back. And I'm like, okay, this is not gonna stand. Like, boundary time, I'm setting a boundary. This is my spot in line, and I'm gonna stay right here on this bleacher. And so he's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, dude, I'm saving a spot for my team. Just, sit behind me, not a big deal. And he's like, no, I am staying right here. You're gonna scoot back. And I'm like, no. And so this kind of goes back and forth a little bit, and the teams start to move up a row. And I will never forget what happens next. I'm like, all right, dude, like I'm gonna move up. And time slows down, and I just remember this kid taking his fist and coming around and boom, punches me as hard as he can right in the chest. And like one of those things where like I fly backward into the next seat, and then at that point, I did not stick firm to my boundaries. I was like, okay, I'll scoot back, right? But that's an example of like you set a boundary. That guy was obviously not respecting the boundaries that I set. And that's a very, very, very physical, extreme example of someone that ignores our boundaries when we try to set boundaries. But this happens to us all the time. This happens to us when we tell a friend that they hurt us, and they're like, dude, I was just joking. You're overreacting. They're pushing against your boundaries. This happens to us when we tell someone, hey, I know you were just joking when you were messing around and hitting me or punching me or whatever, but it really hurt. And they're like, dude, you're a baby. They're ignoring our boundaries. How do we handle those situations when we communicate to someone, hey, I want a relationship to be healthy and better, and they just ignore our boundaries? This is where it gets really, really difficult. And the first thing that we have to do in these situations is we have to understand that we can control us, but we can't control anybody else. We can control ourselves, we can control our reactions, and the truth is we can't control anybody else. And that's a really difficult thing, because I don't know about you guys, but when I first started like this boundary setting thing in my life, I thought, okay, the reason I'm setting boundaries is so that people will do what I want them to do. And the reason that I'm setting boundaries is so that people will stop doing things that are hurting me, or people will stop saying things that are hurting me, or people will stop doing things that are making me uncomfortable. And the further I've gotten into this boundary setting thing, I've realized that the truth of the matter is I can control myself, but I can't control anybody else. And so it's kind of this thing where we have to understand that setting boundaries is less about making someone else change and more about inviting healthy people into our lives. Setting boundaries is less about making someone else change and more about inviting healthy people into our lives. Here's the beautiful thing about setting boundaries, is that the people that respect your boundaries and that decide to change for you, those are the healthy people that you want in your life. The people that make the changes for you are the healthy people that you want in your life. And you can't force anybody to change. You can't control anybody else. The only person we can control is ourselves. And the point of setting boundaries was never to control other people. It was always to protect ourselves. The point in setting boundaries was always to protect ourselves and to be able to surround ourselves with strong relationships. It was always about inviting healthy people into our lives so that we have the best relationships we can possibly have on this earth. Let's be honest. The guy that was sitting next to me at the volleyball tournament after lunch when I was in 6th grade, how often do you think I went up to that guy and I was like, hey, dude, you want to hang out Friday night? Never? Like, why would I want to hang out with someone like that? Because we invite healthy people into our lives. And so the first thing we have to understand is people begin to push against our boundaries is we have to understand we can't control them. And we have to understand maybe they don't care about us as much as we thought they did. And so what do we do next? And the next thing is really hard. And this is where boundaries get really painful. Because the next thing we do is we don't get angry, we don't scream, yell, we don't just tear them down. The next thing we do is we recognize maybe they don't care about us as much as we thought they did. And so we put distance. And we say, if you are someone that is not going to respect my boundaries in my life, if you are not someone that's going to be a strong, strengthening relationship and be a part of my life, I'm going to put distance between me and you, and I'm going to invite other people into my life that are strong relationships. That can be really painful. That can be really hard when one of your friends you recognize you need to hang out less with them on Friday nights. That can be really, really hard when someone that has been your friend since elementary school, suddenly you're like, there may be a healthier relationship for me to step into than this friendship that I've had for so long. And as you guys get older and you step into adult relationships, that can be really hard. It can be really hard, even as an adult in my own life, to look at fellow adults around me and say, okay, I need to put some distance here. I need to invite this person closer into my life. I need to give this person less influence over me and give this person more influence over me. Because the truth of the matter is, the people that are ignoring my boundaries are bringing negativity into my life. And so I want less negativity in my life. I want less weak relationships, and I want more strong relationships. I want more people in my life that are going to build me up, that are going to respect me, that I can respect them, and we can grow together and do this thing called life in a way that is awesome and incredible and the way that God designed it. And that can be really hard. But here's the truth. The best relationships you can have in life, the best relationships you can have in life as when you begin distancing yourself from people who ignore your boundaries. And you begin surrounding yourself with people who respect your boundaries. The best relationships you can have in your life is when you begin distancing yourself from people who ignore your boundaries, and you begin surrounding yourself with people who respect your boundaries. It's so, so important that we understand this. And you guys, as a middle school and high school student, I was never taught this. This is something that I have had to learn as an adult, and it has been so hard to learn. And so my hope is that maybe this is not something that is going to radically change your life right now, but it's something that you can start small and you can grow. And when you are 40 years old, you will be leaps and bounds ahead of where I am right now in boundary setting. Your relationships will be healthier, and you will have less negative relationships in your life. The best relationships you can have is when you begin distancing yourself from people who ignore your boundaries, and you begin inviting people in that are strengthening relationships that respect your boundaries. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus is teaching in a synagogue, which synagogue is just this big Bible word that means church. So Jesus is teaching in this church in Luke chapter 4, and he's speaking to people about his future. And Jesus does this incredible thing in Luke chapter 4. He goes to his hometown to speak. And Jesus explains to the people in his hometown that he's the Son of God. He's the one they've been waiting for. He is the one that they've been praying for years. He's going to come. He's going to save them. Everything is going to change. He is the one that is going to be like the Savior of the world. And the people, when they hear this, they say, wait a minute. Dude, we know you. You're Joseph's son. You're a carpenter. You built my table. I'm not sure you're the one that we've been waiting for. And in that moment, Jesus sets a boundary. And this is what people do to us so often in our lives. This is what people do to me. And if you're anything like me, I'm sure it happens to you as well. People try to tell us who we are. And the only person that can tell us who we are is God. And so these people try to tell Jesus who he is. They're like, dude, we know you. You're Joseph's son. You're a carpenter. You think you're something that is great and incredible, but really you're just this lowly kid that we've known our entire lives. And Jesus goes into this whole thing where he explains, listen, I've come to save the world. And you may not believe it, but it's true. And he sets this boundary where he says, this thing that I'm going to do is so much larger than you have ever thought. And he says, I'm not only coming to save you as Jews, I'm coming to save everybody. And he brings up some specific Gentiles that have been saved in the past. Gentiles is just another Bible word that means people that aren't Jews. And the thing is, Jews hated Gentiles. And so Jesus says, listen, this is bigger than you ever imagined, and I'm coming to save everybody. And they do not respect his boundary. Look at what they do. When they heard this, everyone in the synagogue was filled with anger, and they rose up and ran him out of town. They led him to the crest of the hill on which their town had been built so that they could throw him off the cliff. Now, think about this. We don't think about Jesus' early life very often. We think about Jesus being born, and then all of a sudden we think about Jesus doing miracles and teaching and being this adult guy. From the time Jesus was born until the time when he started teaching and doing these miracles, he had relationships. He had friends. He had adults that had poured and invested into his life. He had people that he grew up with, people that he used to play tag with and run around with, people that he used to hang out with on Friday nights, and people that he used to walk over, not really call or text, but walk over and be like, hey, let's hang out. And he goes to these people excited. He's like, guys, I've got great news for you. This is going to be incredible. Listen up. I want you to be one of the first to know I'm here to save you and I'm here to save everybody. And they're like, no. And I love the way Jesus responds to this boundary setting. He doesn't get mad. I mean, he's God. He could be like, dude, I'll prove it to you right now. Boom, right? He could just show off his might and his power and be like, eat that for breakfast. He doesn't do any of that. He says, listen, this is what I want for you. I want this for you. But if you're not going to be a strong relationship in my life, as painful as it may be, us growing up together, I've got to go somewhere else. I've got to invite some people into my life that are going to be strong, that are going to come with me and do this thing that is bigger than we ever imagined. And so it says, he passed through the crowd and went on his way. He walked away. And that doesn't mean he never saw these people again. We see throughout the Gospels Jesus talking to his mom and his brothers and people from his hometown from time to time. But what I see happening here, and again, this is, I do this from time to time. This is from my own mind. But what I see happening here is Jesus is saying, listen, I'm going to put some distance here. God has this thing for my life, and so I'm setting a boundary. If you're not going to be a part of it, that's fine. But I need people that are going to be a part of it. And he gives us this incredible example of how to set boundaries in our life. We put space and distance with the people that ignore our boundaries, and we invite people into our lives that respect our boundaries. Because here's the truth. I want to say this again. I want you guys to grasp this. The best relationships you can have in your life are not the people that are the most popular, are not the people that if you can catch a ride on their coattails, they're going to take you places. The best relationships you can have in your life are when you invite people into your life that respect your boundaries, that strengthen you, that help you grow. And when you put distance in the relationships and people that ignore your boundaries, that bring negativity into your life. The best relationships you can have in your life are when you put distance between the people that ignore your boundaries and you invite people in that strengthen your boundaries. And so this week, I always give a practical challenge every week. This week, I just want you to examine your relationships. Look at your friendships. Look at the people that are part of your life. Look at your acquaintances. Look at the people that you are considering being friends with. And just ask yourself, is that a strengthening relationship or is that a negative relationship? And begin to really examine that. Where do I need to put some distance? Where do I need to invite someone in closer? And just let that roll around in the back of your mind this week. And I am convinced that God will begin to show you relationships that you can invite into your life that will encourage you to grow and become the person that he always created you to be. Let me pray for you guys. God, thank you so much for relationships.